Welcome. Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming today. I know it's a really busy time in the semester. We're trying to power through these last 2 weeks, right? But this is our very last webinar of the semester and the year. It's really hard to believe it's this time already. Today's a really exciting topic because we're going to be exploring saving and investing and really talking about how you can leverage saving and investing to reach your short-term and long-term financial goals. So really good stuff today. Again, I'm so glad you were able to make it. My name is Allie Smith, and I'm a specialist here at Penn State's Sokolov-Miller Family Financial and Life Skills Center. I host the regular webinar series, the one that you're in right now, and I also lead the one-on-one financial coaching program here at the center. Aidan Kamowski is one of our financial literacy ambassadors. He is also here with me today. I'll let him introduce himself here.
Thank you, Allie. So yes, like Allie said, I am a student ambassador here, currently working at the center. I am a fourth year student. At the end of my time at Penn State, I will be graduating with a bachelor's in supply chain management within the business college. And this is a little over 2 years for me working at the center. So been here a long time, still super love it. Very excited to be co-hosting this webinar with Allie. Also, I will be in the chat posting a lot of helpful links and hopefully answering some of your questions. But thank you all for coming today.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Aidan. So I'll give Aidan a little plug here. Way back when he actually created this saving and investing slide deck. So he's really familiar with this one. And we were just talking before we got started here. He's really excited about this one today. So just had to plug him and all the great work that he did on this slide deck. So if you guys have questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to use the chat, use the Q&A. For any questions that we don't get to in the moment, we'll address them at the end of the webinar. I did go ahead and put out our Getting to Know You poll as well. So I see you guys are answering that. It looks like we, as usual, have a really great mix of folks here in the audience today. We've got undergraduate students, graduate students, staff and faculty, and at least one alumni. So welcome all. Thank you for coming. Also, one more housekeeping item here. For those of you who are attending from the SMEAL Ethical Leadership Challenge, we will go ahead and post that QR code at the end of today's webinar. So with introductions and housekeeping items out of the way, we want to kind of turn it over to you all because we really want today's webinar about saving and investing to be just a little bit more engaging. We would love to know how you feel about saving and investing and kind of about money in general. So in the chat, we'll give you the chance to answer one, two, or all three of these questions. You can tell us how you feel about money, something really fun that you've been saving for, or your thoughts about investing. Let's just take a few seconds here and get some thoughts from the group on really how we're feeling as we enter this conversation about saving and investing. Aidan, you can put one in the chat too, if you've got feelings about any of these. Okay, yes, I love it. A trip to Ireland. That is amazing. And I love investing is wise. Investing is very wise, and we're going to talk about all of that today. Why it's wise, how to do it. Penn State York campus representing. Thank you for coming. Okay. Saving for a future house, future car. I love it. We've got some investing for or I'm sorry, we've got some confusing feelings about investing, overwhelming feelings, anxious feelings. Okay. So I think we kind of in the audience share this sentiment that we feel a little bit worried or anxious about our money. We feel a little confused and overwhelmed about investing, and that's okay. I think a lot of people share that same kind of feeling even outside of today's webinar, right? So let me just start knowing that this is kind of the feeling that I'm getting here. Let me just start with a quick quote. When it comes to investing, there's nothing to lose and everything to gain by keeping things as simple as you can. And this is a quote from my very favorite investing book. It's called The Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins. And for those of you who do feel overwhelmed and anxious about your money and about saving and investing, the goal of today's webinar is really to kind of ease those feelings a little bit. Knowledge is power when it comes to everything in your financial life, but especially with this investing piece, right? I think also coming from this perspective that investing doesn't have to be complicated to be good can be really helpful too. Our goal today is to build your comfort around this topic and give you the tools and information that you need to make informed decisions regarding your own saving and investing. So before we dive into this conversation here, let's take a quick look at our ladder to financial wellness. If you've attended our webinars before, you have seen this ladder many times, and you know that at the center, we like to approach financial wellness with this ladder framework. Personally, here's what I know to be true about climbing a ladder. First of all, a stable base is important, right? You don't want to set your ladder on an unstable foundation. That's a recipe for disaster. Also, when you climb a ladder, you kind of want to take it one step at a time, right? You don't want to just hop up to the top. That might not go well. Our financial wellness ladder works pretty much exactly the same. Our budget is our stable base and our foundation in our financial wellness, and we work our way up the ladder one step at a time. It can take years or even a lifetime to make your way up this financial wellness ladder. Today, we are talking about saving and investing, which fall on step 2, 4, and 5 of our ladder. So step 2 is creating an emergency fund. That requires saving, right? And then steps 4 and 5 are planning for the future and growing your wealth. So both of those require some form of saving and investing. So we're going to kind of zoom in on these latter steps 2, 4, and 5 today. But as we're going through today's webinar, keep this ladder in mind. We're talking about saving and investing, but there are some other things you might consider with your kind of overall financial wellness in mind. Like if you don't currently have a budget, or if you're maybe on step 3, carrying some high interest debt, for example, on things like credit cards, you might want to consider those things first. So as we start to dive into this conversation about saving and investing, let's talk about the why behind it all. And the why is really this magic of compounding. You may have heard of this concept before, the magic of compound interest or the magic of compound returns. Albert Einstein called compound interest the 8th wonder of the world. So what is it? It's interest on interest. And as simple as that sounds, over time, it becomes really, really powerful. We'll look at a specific example that kind of shows you how powerful it can be later on in the webinar. But for now, we've got this QR code on the screen here that will take you to a compound interest calculator if you want to use your phone. And Aidan also just put a link in the chat if you would rather like use your computer to check it out. But if you've never used a compound interest calculator before, I definitely encourage you to just take a minute and kind of play around with this calculator. On the one that we shared, you'll put in an initial deposit amount, a contribution amount, and you can choose how frequently you want to contribute that amount or you would contribute that amount. So monthly or annually, and then how many years to let that money grow. For estimated rate of return, you might want to use 8% because that's the average annual rate of return in the stock market when we look long term. For compound frequency in this calculator, feel free to leave it as monthly or you can change it to daily. And if this jargon feels confusing or overwhelming already, don't stress. We're going to unpack all of these things throughout this webinar. But just to kind of set the stage here, I wanted you guys to kind of take a look at one of these calculators and just see like how significantly money can grow, especially when it's getting an 8% rate of return. If you play around with this, you'll notice that the longer amount of years that you put in will really start to affect the amount of money that you have in the long run. The longer the time that you have to invest, the more time that you have for this magic of compounding to really kick in here. So continuing on, we're going to revisit this topic later. And if you use the compound interest calculator, actually feel free to share your thoughts in the chat if you have any. From here, continuing on, why do we save money? So I saw at the beginning in the chat, people save for traveling, for cars, to buy a house, some really fun trips you guys mentioned in the chat, right? So first of all, we save for our personal goals. Maybe we do want to travel or make one of those larger purchases like a home or a car. We'd definitely need to save for those things, right? Our emergency fund is also something that we should save for. Your emergency fund is ideally at least 3 months of your living expenses that you have stashed away in something like a high yield savings account. So this is not necessarily 3 months of your income, but of your expenses. So things that if you were to no longer have your income, you would still need to pay for on a monthly basis. So things like a mortgage or a rent payment, utilities, food, debt payments, that kind of thing, at least 3 months of those. Along with maintaining a budget, having an emergency fund is another foundational aspect of your financial wellness. When emergencies inevitably arise and you have an emergency fund, they are no longer financial emergencies. When you've got an emergency fund, you've kind of lessened your emergency by one level, right? Because you can use the money that you set aside in the past for your future self to take care of whatever it is and move on and deal with whatever repercussions are kind of unfolding, right? You lessen that emergency by at least one level. And then, along with our personal goals and our emergency fund, we can also save for our periodic expenses. Personally, I save for my sewer bill, which is billed every 3 months, my car insurance, which is billed every 6 months, and also money to get my hair done every 4-ish months. And lately, in the past few months, I've also been setting some money aside on a monthly basis to cover those Christmas gifts. Saving for your periodic expenses just involves figuring out what periodic expenses that you have. So what bills do you pay that don't get charged to you on a monthly basis? How much you spend on those things on an annual basis, and then dividing that annual amount by 12 to get to a monthly figure that you can set aside in your budget each month. Personally, I think it feels really good to save for these periodic expenses because when these bills do come out every few months, my monthly budget doesn't take a huge hit. Like when my 6-month car insurance bill comes out, I don't have to drain my entire budget in that month. I can just pull what I've been setting aside on a monthly basis out of my savings, pay for it, and move on. My monthly budget doesn't change at all in that moment. So knowing that we have all of these different things that we're saving for, our savings accounts might end up looking something like this bucket. You might have money for your short-term goals, your periodic expenses like insurance, taxes, car registration, and gift shopping, and your emergency fund, all kind of commingling in your savings account. Personally, I do like to break it down a little further and have separate savings accounts for my short-term goals, my periodic expenses, and my emergency fund, but that's just personal preference. A great place to park something like your emergency fund or any other pot of money that you don't need to access super often, but also want to keep safe, is a high yield savings account. High yield savings accounts right now are paying between 4 to 5% interest. They are typically online accounts, and typically they are strictly online accounts that are paying these 4 to 5% interest rates. And online savings accounts can afford to pay a little bit more, right? Because they don't have to pay to maintain the building, keep the lights on, and pay employees to like staff the place, right? There are a lot of different companies that offer really great online high yield savings accounts. And if you don't have a high yield savings account yet, I would encourage you to make it your mission to open one. There's really no downside to a high yield savings account. And Aidan just put a link in the chat where you can do some initial exploration on what sorts of high yield savings accounts are out there. And if you don't have one already, which one might be best for you? As you explore, I see a great question coming through the chat from Sasha. We don't necessarily give recommendations for companies, but I will give you some things to look for as you're exploring different companies. You want to take note of what interest rate they're offering, any minimum balances that you need to keep in your account to get that rate, and any fees associated with the account. Personally, I would encourage you to look for one that is free to open and maintain and comes without minimum balances. So those could be some guidelines on what to look for as you're exploring accounts. And I know the link that Aidan shared definitely has some accounts on there that meet that criteria. There are also money market accounts. Those are a different type of savings account. They're pretty similar to high yield savings accounts, but money market accounts typically do have minimum balance requirements, and they also come with the ability to write checks or use a debit card linked directly to the account. Because of the minimum balance requirement, a money market account might not be the best place to stash your emergency fund because you never know when you'll need to pull from your emergency fund or even how much you'll need. So a money market account could serve you in a different way though, right? If you need access to a savings account with checks or a debit card, that could be the account for you. When it comes to your savings and savings accounts, I'll just say the worst thing that you can do is keep all of your money in your checking account because you'll have access to it all. So it'll be really easy to spend it. And in your checking account, you won't be earning much, if any, interest. Most savings accounts do earn interest of some kind, and we want our money to be working for us whenever possible. So we've talked about your emergency fund, right? And where you can put your emergency fund to kind of allow it to still be in a safe place, but also working for you. We're skipping considering our debt. So we've graduated to the fourth rung of our financial wellness ladder, which is to plan for the future. So just take a quick minute here to kind of look at how our ladder is laid out here, right? I keep coming back to this ladder because it's so important. So we're starting with our budget. Our budget is our stable base and foundation in our financial wellness, right? An emergency fund is almost as equally as important as having a budget. An emergency fund is a very important piece of your overall financial life. From there, considering your debt is a good next step. Like I said earlier, any high interest debt could be prioritized once you've got a good budget and a solid emergency fund. And then from there, we're in this space where we are planning for the future. Planning for the future is going to look different for us all. But when you think of planning for the future, you might think of these sorts of things. So, retirement, marriage, children, home buying, wealth building. And we must invest for these goals. Jump scare, right? I hope you guys heard that. I hope it didn't scare anyone. We must invest for these goals because of inflation. Saving is not enough. So, here, before we move on and really dive into this investing conversation, I just want to take a minute to address the difference between saving and investing. So, when we save our money, we're putting it into some sort of savings vehicle, like a savings account. When we save, our money is safe and secure as long as our accounts are FDIC insured, which most of them are. Safe is good, right? But when we save, our money doesn't earn much money for us. 4 to 5% in a high yield savings account or maybe a certificate of deposit is going to be about the most money that your savings is going to earn you right now. On the other hand, when we invest our money, it's much riskier because we're subjecting our money to the market and the market is volatile, right? But investing can also come with a higher return when done properly. When we invest long term, our money can earn anywhere from 8 to 10% annually on average. And we're going to talk more about this. But if we save long term, we'll likely end up losing our money because of the impact that inflation has on savings or on cash. This QR code that you see in the corner will take you to an inflation calculator that you can use to kind of see this for yourself. Aidan's also going to drop a link to that in the chat here. If you want to play around with it, it's kind of depressing. And the idea that it's going to bring you to is that when you save long term, you'll actually be losing money. And so you might be wondering, does it ever make sense to save versus invest then? Like if I'm losing money, should I even be saving? And I mean, we want our emergency funds to be saved, right? We want to make sure we have that money when we need it because we never know when emergency is going to arise. If you've got short-term financial goals, you also will likely want to save that money rather than invest it. You should really let your goal for your money and your own personal risk tolerance. So when I say that, I mean how you feel about risk. You should let your goal and your risk tolerance guide whether you save or invest your money. A good guiding light here to help you decide, should I save or should I invest, is the 5 to 7 year rule. And this says that if your goal for your money is less than 5 years away, you might want to save that money to keep it safe and secure. And on the other hand, if your goal for your money is more than 7 years away, you might want to invest that money to take advantage of the compound growth that investing can offer. The 5 to 7 year space is kind of the gray area when you really have to rely on your own personal risk tolerance to help you make that decision. So for example, if you are saving for a car that you want to buy in 5 years, you'd likely want to save that money in something like a high yield savings account or maybe a certificate of deposit. On the other hand, if you're saving for a house that you hope to buy in 10 years, you might want to invest that money to take advantage of compounding returns. But at the same time, if you're saving for that house and you are a really risk adverse person, you still might save it rather than invest it, especially if investing it would keep you up at night. So that's kind of a way you can start to think about that. Should I save or should I invest? But to answer this question at the top here, will saving be enough? When it comes to retirement, saving, unfortunately, will not be enough. So we have to be comfortable investing our funds for retirement because in this world of inflation that we live in, investing our retirement funds is absolutely necessary. So let's just check out an example of what that could look like. Here we've got 3 people. Talia begins investing at age 35, and she is investing $5,000 per year until she reaches age 65. So in total, she's contributed $150,000 over the course of 30 years. Jess begins investing at age 25, also investing $5,000 a year, only until she reaches age 35. So she's done this for 10 years, and in total, she's contributed $50,000. Nate also begins investing at age 25. He's also putting in $5,000 a year, but he doesn't stop until he hits age 65. So he's investing for a total of 40 years and has contributed $200,000 over the course of those 40 years. If these 3 folks all earned the same rate of return on their investments, who do you think will have the largest nest egg by age 65? Let me see in the chat what you think. Okay, Nate, yes. That one's pretty clear, right? Nate has invested the most and he's been doing it for the longest. So yeah, he's probably going to have more. What about between Talia and Jess? Who do you think is going to have more at age 65 between the 2 of them? Talia. Okay, let's see. All right, so we got Nate. We know he's got the most here. So Jess actually ends up with slightly more, which is crazy. This is not what you would think, right? Talia contributed way more of her own money, but Jess still ended up with more because she started earlier. So I mean, I live and breathe and work in financial literacy, right? I work in this industry, and seeing examples like this still blow my socks off every time. This is the magic and power of not only compounding returns, but also starting young. Because Jess started at age 35, she did not have to put in nearly as much money as Talia, who waited 10 years, and they're ending up with close to the same, right? Jess has got a little bit more, but they've got pretty close to the same amount, and Jess contributed a third of what Talia did. This is a realistic example, and let's talk about the rate of return in the market for a minute. This example is using a yearly return of about 8%, which is totally reasonable. Now, this doesn't mean that your money will earn 8% each and every year when you invest, but rather over time, this is what your annual returns will likely average out to be. So for example, one year you could earn 7%, one year you could earn -4%, and then maybe one year the market does really well and goes crazy and you earn 20%. When you kind of zoom out and look at your returns over time, you'll likely see returns of about 8 to 10% annually. So this is the why behind it all, right? Let me go back a quick second. This is the why behind it all. And when we invest, this is really what we're trying to achieve, right? We are trying to build our nest eggs for retirement. We are trying to build our wealth and really create a good pot of money for ourselves without hopefully having to think about it too much. When it comes to planning for the future, the biggest expense that we likely need to think about is most likely retirement. When you have access to an employer-sponsored retirement plan, that is usually the best place to start with your retirement savings because that oftentimes comes with an employer match. So if you work here at Penn State, for example, and use the 403B retirement plan, when you contribute 5% of your salary every month, Penn State contributes 9.29% of your salary. To be honest, this is one of the best matching programs that I've seen. So thank you to Penn State. But an example of a simple match would be if you contribute 5% of your salary, your company also contributes 5% of your salary. A good rule of thumb here is to always contribute enough to your employer-sponsored plan to take advantage of that full employer match. So if they're matching 5%, you better be putting in your 5% because that is 100% rate of return on your money right there. A 401k or a 403b typically follows the traditional taxing system. So usually with these employer-sponsored retirement accounts, you contribute money pre-tax, and that will lower your taxable income for that year. And then you'll pay tax on that money when you take it out in retirement. So you can kind of think of it as having to pay yourself a gross salary in retirement, which will then be taxed to arrive at your net salary. I have also, though, started to see companies offering Roth 401ks, which is really interesting. And a 401k or a 403b, those are known as defined contribution plans because what you contribute is consistent, but the benefit that you actually receive in retirement will be based on how much you contribute and also how well your investments do. On the other hand, a pension is known as a defined benefit plan because the benefit that you receive in retirement will be the thing that's consistent. Pension plans are slowly but surely kind of becoming a thing of the past. Penn State does currently offer a hybrid plan, which is a combination of the two plans, the pension and also the defined contribution plan. Anyway, once you have fully taken advantage of your employer-sponsored retirement plan, whether that looks like putting money towards your pension or maxing out your 401k or 403b match, you might want to move on to an individual retirement account. Or maybe you're someone who doesn't have access to an employer-sponsored retirement plan right now and still want to get started in building your nest egg for retirement. An IRA or an individual retirement account would be a great thing to look into. This is something that you manage completely on your own. This is separate from the employer-sponsored retirement account. And with the IRA, this is money that is to be earmarked for retirement. So it's really meant to be drawn from after age 59 and a half. There are traditional IRAs and Roth IRAs, and the main kind of difference between these accounts is how they're taxed. When it comes to these accounts, the traditional and the Roth IRA, there are some exceptions and times that you can take out and have access to your money before age 59 and a half. If you withdraw before age 59 and a half outside of one of these exceptions, you'll likely be subject to a 10% penalty and have to pay taxes on the money in many cases. One of the things that you can withdraw for early is to buy a first home. And I'll have Aidan drop a link in the chat with more information on what that looks like if you'd like to read up a little bit on that. The Roth and the traditional IRA work a little bit differently when you are using funds to buy a first home. So if that's something you're thinking about and your wheels are turning around that, I definitely encourage you to check out that article. It is from Investopedia, so it might be a little dry, but it's got a lot of great information to help you do that planning. So the Roth IRA can be a really powerful investing tool, especially for young folks. And on the next slide, we've got a short video to help explain and unpack the difference between the Roth and the traditional IRA.
Roth IRAs. Roth IRAs are retirement savings accounts with big benefits. Here's how saving in a Roth IRA works. First, you open an account. Then, you contribute after-tax money to the account, such as money you're transferring from your bank account. Your money grows tax-free over time while it's invested in your Roth IRA, and eventually you can withdraw the money tax-free once you're in retirement. Roth IRAs can come with some special added benefits. You can withdraw your contributions penalty-free anytime. You can use the funds in your account for a first-time home purchase without paying withdrawal penalties. And you're likely to have many investment choices with a Roth IRA. The main difference between traditional IRAs and Roth IRAs is when you pay taxes. With a traditional IRA, you contribute pre-tax money directly from your paycheck. Your money grows tax-deferred, and you then pay taxes on withdrawals in retirement. With a Roth IRA, you contribute after-tax money, your money grows tax-free, and you pay no taxes on withdrawals in retirement. Because they let you get your taxes out of the way today, Roth IRAs can be a great choice if you're in a low tax bracket now and maybe in a higher one in retirement. Whether it's the only account you use or just one of a number of retirement accounts, a Roth IRA can bring some important advantages to your retirement planning.
Whoops, what did I do here? Okay. Okay, so a short and sweet video there, right? So some takeaways with the traditional versus the Roth IRA is you've really got to think about some takeaways if you're trying to decide between the two, right? Is you've really got to think about what your tax bracket looks like now versus in retirement. If you are making less now than you think you will be later on in retirement, the Roth might be a good thing to invest through, right? Take advantage of that tax-free growth that you'll have. And on the other hand, if you are someone who is maybe in the peak of your career, you are in your peak income earning years, the traditional IRA might be better for you because you're likely in a higher tax bracket now than you will be in retirement. So with the traditional IRA, you go ahead and put money in without having paid tax on it, and that actually decreases your taxable income for that year. So things to think about, right? If you've got any questions about traditional versus Roth IRA, you can go ahead and put them in the chat or the Q&A, and we can talk about that more. If not, we've officially graduated to the fifth and final rung of our financial wellness ladder, where we are thinking all about growing our wealth. And remember, when you get to this stage of the ladder, you should really have a good, solid financial foundation underneath you. And so what I mean by that is that you shouldn't be focused on growing your wealth if you don't even have a budget, right? Or if you don't have an emergency fund. You really got to create this good, solid, stable financial foundation first. When you're there, building and growing your wealth does require investing of some kind. We know that saving is not enough to grow our wealth because of inflation, right? So next we'll talk about options for investing outside of these retirement accounts, because you can invest inside of your retirement accounts and you're technically on your planning for the future stage, right? But you're still kind of growing your wealth in that way. But when we talk about the fifth rung of this ladder, we're really talking about investing outside of retirement accounts. And beginning to invest outside of your retirement accounts could feel overwhelming because you've got a lot of choices, but it doesn't really have to be overwhelming. Remember, I'll drop this quote again. When it comes to investing, there's nothing to lose and everything to gain by keeping things as simple as you can. And again, that's just a quote from my favorite investing book called The Simple Path to Wealth. It's a great one. If you need a good investing read to feel a little bit more confident about this stuff, I definitely recommend. So when you are thinking about beginning to invest outside of retirement, here's what you got to do. Very first thing you'll figure out is how much you're going to invest. Will you invest regularly, like on a monthly basis, or will you invest annually? Maybe you decide to invest your tax return annually. That would be a great place to start, I think. From there, you will open an investment account. There are many options for investment accounts, and we'll look at those on the next slide. But oftentimes, a robo-advising account or a brokerage account is a good choice for new investors. Once you've opened your account, you'll choose your investment mix, or basically you'll choose what investments that you want to have yourself invested into, and you'll purchase them through your account if necessary. Then you'll just go in and change your investments over time. Excuse me. Maybe you are deciding to accumulate a lot of one thing. So maybe you are buying the same investment every time, or maybe you're changing it up as you go. So you might be shifting from a riskier portfolio to a safer portfolio as you get older, that kind of thing. You can change your investments as infrequently as one time per year, especially when you are investing for those longer term goals like retirement or general wealth building. So let's take a look at the different investment accounts available here. Here are some options where you might get started. You can open a brokerage account, work with a financial advisor, or utilize a robo-advisor. And then for brokerage accounts, there are full service brokers and also discount brokerages. From my experience, the two most cost-effective and accessible of these investment accounts are going to be your discount brokerages and robo-advising accounts. If you ever find yourself at a point where you've got hundreds of thousands of dollars to manage in your portfolio, you might at that point want to work with a financial advisor or a full service brokerage. But the gist out there is that typically you have to have at least $100,000 in your portfolio to work with a financial advisor. So hopefully you get there at some point, but it's also not necessary to work with a financial advisor. You can make good investment choices all on your own. If you are a newer investor and are maybe working with a few hundred or a few $1,000s, deciding between a brokerage account and a robo-advising account is a good place to start. So I'll just kind of explain the difference and what each of these things mean. First of all, with a robo-advising account, when you go to sign up for the account, they'll ask you some questions like what you're saving for, when you need the money that you're saving, so like when you need to have access to it, and how you personally feel about taking risks with your money. With this information, they'll probably ask you a few more things too, but that's kind of the main idea, the main things that they're going to ask you about this money that you want to invest. So with this information, they'll build you your own personalized portfolio composed of a certain percentage of stocks and a certain percentage of bonds, maybe some other things thrown in there too, but likely it'll be mostly stocks and bonds. And anytime you put money into that account, it will be automatically invested for you according to how you answered that quiz, and according to what your portfolio that they've created for you looks like. So you can just put money in that account and it's invested. On the other hand, if you think you'd be comfortable choosing your own investments within your investment account, or you actually want to choose your own investments within your investment account, a discount brokerage might be best for you. And with this type of account, you fund the account by putting money into it. And then once money is in there, you actually have to go into your account, decide what investments that you would like to invest in, and purchase those investments. A mistake that I've seen people make in the past is like they open up an investment account and they put money into it, and they don't realize that it's actually not invested. It's just sitting in their account, right? And if that's the case, it's not actually doing what you want it to do, right? Because it's not exposed to the market and getting those compounding returns. So when we have a discount brokerage account that we manage ourselves, we have to be cognizant about actually going into our accounts and making sure that our money is invested. I'll have Aidan drop some links in the chat if you're curious about robo-advising accounts versus discount brokerage accounts. These are NerdWallet articles that can help you kind of get started with research in each of those areas and maybe help you decide if you are a do-it-yourself investor or if you might be more comfortable using a robo-advisor, for example. So when we talk about choosing your own investments or choosing your investment mix, here are some options or different things that you could be choosing from. There are bonds, real estate, stocks, and then alternative investments. We're going to unpack each of these and kind of give you the basics behind them. Some quick basics. So starting with bonds, when you buy a bond, you are actually loaning money to a government or a corporation. The organization pays you to lend them money. So for example, if your local city needs to build a new bridge but doesn't have the funds to do so, they might issue bonds to raise that money. People who buy those bonds are lending the city money to build the bridge. The city will then pay those folks regularly based on the interest rate that was agreed upon in the bond. And then when the bond matures, the city will pay back that initial investment to those investors. So the amount that they gave the city, they're going to get back, plus those frequent payments, right? Bonds are usually less risky, but there is a rating system to help determine the risk of each specific bond. And the fixed returns that come with bonds can be helpful for planning purposes. Drawbacks with bonds are that because they are typically less risky, they also typically provide lower returns. Rising interest rates and the current high interest rate environment that we're in can decrease bond values. And if you invest into corporate bonds, there could be risk for default. You've really got to check out those bond ratings to make sure you're investing in good, solid bonds. There are also bond funds that can be invested in through platforms like brokerage accounts and robo-advising accounts. Bond funds can give investors easier access to bonds, and it's kind of less research intensive than really digging into each specific bond and looking up their rating and that kind of thing. So bond funds are an option too. So check out this risk meter on the bottom right here. Bonds are typically low risk. Moving on to real estate, the two main ways you can make money investing in real estate are from the home or property appreciating in value or through renting properties out and making some rental income. Investing in real estate can take a lot of planning and money down, and it can also really tie up your money. So real estate investment trusts or REITs can give investors better access to real estate investments. When you invest into a REIT, you're investing in companies that own or finance income-producing real estate across a range of different property sectors. So residential, commercial, that kind of thing. Pros of REITs include they are much more liquid than owning actual property, and they can add some diversification to your portfolio. While cons include the current high interest rate environment that we're in right now can decrease property and REIT values. and they can be harder to value and research intensive. So for our risk meter, we've got medium risk here for the REITs. Moving on to stocks. I think this is what we all tend to think about when we think about investing, right? Is buying stocks. So when you own a stock, you own part of a company. So if you buy a share of Apple, for example, you own a tiny little piece of Apple. There are two ways to earn money when investing in stocks. The first is price appreciation. So the stock value goes up, and also dividends, which is money that the company pays out to their shareholders. And not all companies pay dividends. Positives of stocks include that they typically have high returns. An 8 to 10% average annualized return can be typical for stocks. And they're easy to get access to because you can buy fractional shares. So if you do want to buy Apple and you don't have $190, you can buy a piece of a share with whatever money that you do have. Cons of investing in stocks include that they are high risk and they're also research intensive. Putting all the research into finding the perfect company for you to invest in can definitely be time consuming. And who has time for that, right? In today's day and age. Stocks are also volatile, so it can really be an emotional roller coaster seeing your money go up and down and you're not exactly sure what it's doing, right? So check out our risk meter here, our risk meter here. Stocks are high risk, but there is a way that we can invest into stocks without having to do this crazy research and put all this time and effort into constructing our own portfolios, all while decreasing our own personal risk and diversifying our funds. So Aidan is going to talk to us about mutual funds.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Allie. So, like Allie said, stocks are one of the most popular types of investing, and they are an amazing way to really help build your wealth and invest for retirement as well. Although a lot of the cons that are there are also big things to consider. It is very high risk, as unless you're the CEO of a company, you don't really have any say in what it's doing or if the stock price goes up or goes down. And it can be a big emotional roller coaster. Something could happen on the news, and then all of a sudden, the company that was once doing well could now be bankrupt and worth nothing. So, really trying to understand what's going on in one company is so difficult, let alone trying to understand tons of different companies that you would need to invest in. So, there is another way, though, thankfully, to invest in stocks that's a lot easier. And to do that, we like to use the example of sushi. So, hopefully, that you've had sushi before. It's a really great food. If not, highly recommend Tadashi downtown. But regardless of that, sushi is a really great example for this because, like individual stocks, sushi is a really good food and can be fun to eat. But if you don't know what you're doing, it can be really complex. Trying to find the right base of the right rice, going to the grocery store, trying to pick out all the ingredients, what's on sale, what time of year is best for things, trying to understand what to even buy at what price, what you would want in a sushi roll, then trying to bring it home, cook it perfectly every step, combine it, make it together. And after trying to do all these steps, it gets really overwhelming. Just trying to say it, it gets overwhelming. But there is another option out there. So if you just do one little click, with sushi, you can try and go to the grocery store, prepare everything yourself, or you can just go to a restaurant and have a professional sushi chef prepare things for you. And with that, it can be a lot easier because they are trained professionals, they know what they're doing, and they have done it hundreds and thousands of times. They know what things go well, they know how to cook things well, and you can eat sushi that way. And although with that, you may get, one sushi roll you may not like, but since there's so much variety and they have so much training, it's much more likely that that is a much more pleasant experience than trying to do every single step yourself. With stocks, it's basically the same thing. You can try and compare tech stocks, construction stocks, small ones, large ones, all these different types of stocks, and try and build a portfolio yourself, which is technically possible, but very very difficult to do and can kind of become a full-time job. Or you can just allow things like mutual funds, index funds, and exchange traded funds, which just pile a bunch of stocks together and sell that as one stock by itself, as sort of a fund which holds all these other stocks. So when you just buy one of those, you can actually end up buying a ton of stocks all at once and can make it super easy to have a diverse portfolio that so you're not just invested in one stock, and if that one stock goes down, you lose everything. It's a super popular way to be diversified. Probably the most popular one that you may have heard of is something called the S&P 500, which owns the 500 largest stocks within the United States at any given time. And that is a very popular metric to track how things are going because since it owns so many stocks, it's a really accurate way of the economy as a whole. But it's another really great option just to look into is this way of investing in individual stocks in a little easier way.
Absolutely. Thanks, Aidan. I just love the sushi example. I think it makes so much sense, and I'm so glad you got to share that because again, just plugging Aidan and his greatness, he came up with this whole idea. But yeah, so mutual funds, index funds, exchange traded funds are all ways to investing into those things, rather, are all ways to decrease the risk that comes with just picking individual stocks, right? So they can be a really great option and a great thing to add into your portfolio. So I know we are getting a little short on time here. We've got 2 more slides to get through and then questions. If anyone does need to pop off directly at 1, please feel free to do that. This webinar should be up on YouTube by tomorrow. If you want to catch the end, you can totally do that. But let's fly through alternative investments here. These are things like cryptocurrency, NFTs, collectibles, commodities, or even new business ventures. Pros of alternative investments include that they have the potential for great returns. We have to remember with the potential for great returns also comes with the potential for great risk, right? So we've got to think about that. Alternative investments can be a way to add some diversification into your portfolio. Cons include, we already said that they can be very high risk with things like cryptocurrency. They've got less regulation and reporting requirements, and they can also be complex and potentially expensive. So you have definitely got to do your research before investing into these alternative investments, right? Look at our risk meter here. It is high. So how can we put this all together and create a diversified portfolio? You've got to remember that you should use your goal and your time horizon, or the time that you can invest until you need that money. You've also got to think about your personal risk tolerance and how you feel about taking risks with your money to kind of help decide what your investment mix should look like. You don't want your investments to keep you up at night. We definitely don't want that. So these are going to pop up as we go through. So take a look at each of these circles. First, we've got a conservative portfolio, a lot of bonds and cash in here, right? Next is moderately conservative, slightly more stocks in this one. A moderate portfolio looks like this. You'll see as we go through the amount of stocks that you'll see. As we progress to the aggressive portfolio, will continue to grow. And the cash and bonds will continue to shrink. And this last aggressive portfolio has got mostly stocks, a little bit of cash and bonds, and even some alternative investments. So that is the official end of today's webinar. I hope this was helpful in understanding investing and some of the concepts and strategies behind it. Before we move on to questions, I'll just take 1 quick minute here to share our services for anyone who hasn't attended a webinar before or maybe isn't familiar with what we offer.